welcome to showcase number 110. So we have a lot of stuff to go over today, and most of it is surprisingly kind of intermixed. So usually we have an entire showcase for behind the scenes stuff, or for new art assets, or for kind of intermixed things. Today we have kind of all around things. So we have some new swords that I showed off in our showcase channel, and there's more coming on that later. However, we also have some new assets that we're using for the map that I've actually implemented, and some adjusted assets and some tile set stuff, as well as a bunch of behind-the-scenes things with inventories, some new functionality with furnaces, and the list goes on, really. I'm going to have a nightmare typing up this changelog later because it's been like 2 months. But anyway, my suffering aside, your guys' suffering is probably lessened as well, because my microphone does not sound nearly as bad as it used to. Previously, I was using my headset, and I'm now on my old microphone again. Basically, TLDR, I decided to use my headset because it was just easier and less complicated, I guess. But obviously, as headset microphones tend to do, my headset mic decided to die or start dying, and it sounded like I was sitting in front of a fan, which is obviously a no-no. So now, here we are on my old mic, and it sounds perfect. It's just a little bit more space-consuming, I guess you could say. But anyway, it's better than having a terrible mic. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into this real quick. The first clip is going to be about furnaces, which I will take you away from in a very brief moment. Away from the intro, that is. And then after that, we're going to talk a little bit about creation, which has been reworked, sort of, and what's going on there, as well as finishing up the edit menu, or editing menu, which will be sort of talked about, and tile sets, and weapons, and a couple other, like, spell-related things as well, towards the end. So, I hope you enjoy. Alright, so for our first clip today, we're going to be taking a little bit to talk about smelting, furnaces, and alloys. So if you weren't aware of what alloys are, basically it's an amalgam of up to 3 ore, and the TLDR of that is, if you want to make a more advanced metal than what you can get out of just 3 of one ore, like, say, iron ingots, you need to start smelting in different combinations. Now, there are a lot of these, like a lot of these, and most of them are hidden, so I'm not going to be telling you guys about most of those, you have to find them on your own. But they all serve different purposes. So, like, for instance, I think I have some gold in my inventory that I could show off right here. And you can see in chat, this is basically a universal bonus, a bonus to every affinity. Now, that's great, right? This is fantastic. But if you have a golden staff, right, you don't have the best staff for you. Most people aren't going to have 4 or even 5 elements, so it's not really going to benefit you very much to have one of each, right? You want one, probably, or maybe even 2 at most. And gold just isn't the best for that, right? However, gold is still very valuable because you can use it in different alloys that basically boost its potency in different ways. And that's the really valuable thing about the alloy system. You can take a set of probably 10 or so ore and change them and intermix them to create these much more powerful alloys and materials and so on. Now, just for the record, you can use herbs and gems in this as well. And if you fail, and the combination isn't correct or doesn't equal anything, it'll just give you coal. So you don't lose everything, but coal is pretty useless. So it is what it is. Anyway, you can see here in this inventory of mine, I've done a couple weird things, like why are there 1 stacks everywhere? This is a new change that I made to the inventory system, because I thought it was kind of annoying that I couldn't split stacks. So if you go ahead and grab one, and you can see I'm dragging it around, you can drag wherever you want. If you drag it and then right-click with it, you can create a new stack, and you can continue adding to that stack as much as you want. And if you just drag it onto it, it'll drag what remains on top of it and combine it back again. So if you make a mistake with that, it's not hard to solve. Now, if you do attempt to click onto another one, it'll just swap the 2 stacks, and then you can swap it back again. It's kind of, you know, it doesn't really matter that much, but I thought, people might click on another stack accidentally. I might make that just do nothing, but for right now, it's whatever. So, to make steel, steel for the record in real life is a mixture of iron and carbon, and in real life, for the record, I recognize that steel is 3% carbon, or something close to that. It is basically, like, not even close to what coal is. However, for the purposes of creating this system and kind of representing steel and that presence of carbon, we're going to be using 1 to 2, coal to iron. And again, I recognize that's not how it works. I recognize that most of these alloys aren't how they're made in real life, but it's, you know, fantasy. You can at least appreciate that I tried. I am not a metallurgist. Oh, and this is another thing, actually, that I should mention before we get into smelting. I can't really show it because it's behind this inventory screen, but if I go ahead and stand on top of a like ore, we can say, like say if I drop several coal ore, it'll all combine into 1 stack here on the ground, and I can pick it up all at once. And you can see it says coal ores, I'll fix that later, but anyway, the big thing is just that if you continue dropping things in one spot, it'll all combine into 1 stack, assuming it's the same type. So obviously gold and coal aren't going to mix, but etc. will. So that's cool. It's not too special, but I figured I should mention it anyway. And we can go ahead and split these into different stacks. Oops, I did not mean to do that. There we go. So if we go over here to the furnace, we can see it opens up a little too far to the right. That's kind of just a mistake on my part. I need to bump it over. But anyway, functionality is the same regardless. We're going to go ahead and drag in here 1 coal. And I guess we'll put this at the end to sort of show that it's the least important, I guess. And we'll put in the other 2 iron here. And now we'll go over here so you can see what pops out. If we hit smelt, you'll see it turns into a percentage. It climbs up to 100% after 2.5 seconds, and then it spits out the requisite alloy. And this, in this case, is steel. So alloys in the game right now do not have stats set up yet. That's something that I'll be doing soon. But the way this works is basically a modification. So you essentially turn iron ore and coal ore stats into whatever steel, a steel ingot stats are, if that makes sense. That doesn't kind of like factor in, I guess you could say, the same way that it does with crafting. It's combining multipliers rather than multiplying multipliers, if that makes sense. It's kind of confusing to say, but I hope you get the idea. If we were to continue to try to do this, we actually would fail. But what we can do is quickly drag this out of here and put in a extra coal. So we'll split the stack right there, put another coal, and this will make black iron. And black iron is basically a really shitty version of steel. It's not really that special. Like, there's nothing super valuable about it, but it's there. And the really key ingredient here to this whole system working is that you can use alloys in the recipes of other alloys. So I will tell you straight up, and you can look on the wiki for some more information about some of this stuff under, I think, metals, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, there are some actual legendary materials in the game. And by legendary, I mean like fantasy legendary. They exist. The thing is that they're really, really, really hard to make. A single ingot of a legendary material is extremely difficult to make, not just because of the material input, which is granted very high, because you're, of course, compressing alloys into alloys into alloys, which are compressing ore into ore into ore. It's also very expensive because it takes a really long time to find out the recipe for it, and to do so in a way that's not accidental, because you need to record it and you need to remember that. So that's all really important, and it should all be considered going forward. And I'm not really going to give you guys any other hints. I might show off some other alloy recipes in future videos, but just so you know, there are some really high up there ingots that exist that I can't really talk about. So if you're a blacksmith and you like playing blacksmiths, get out there and make that Nippon steel, brother, because it exists. I mean, not that specifically, but you get the idea. Like, that kind of stuff exists. So anyway, without further ado, I think that we're done with inventory stuff and crafting stuff and smelting and furnace and so on stuff. So I think that we're going to move on and talk about some other things that are going on. And once we're done there, we'll talk a little bit about outfits and weapons and some of the other art assets that I've been getting done recently. Alright, so next up we're going to go ahead and close this furnace because it's not really important to us right now. And what I want to talk about first are some spells that I've added recently for sort of quality of life purposes. I'll talk more about that in just a moment, but before I do that, I wanted to also mention there are now config options, and this for you, Zyda. There are now config options that aren't labeled, that will be labeled in the future, for turning on and off reboot messages and turning on and off tips. So you can toggle both of those now, and obviously this label needs to be changed, but they exist, and that's the most important thing. It should be mentioned, this is another feature that I'll mention soon, but anyway, it should be mentioned that you can't turn off the very close reboot messages. So like if a reboot is happening in 30 minutes, you will get the notifications regardless of your config options, because, I mean, obviously that would be kind of annoying. But, you know, just so it's there, and for those of you that don't like seeing those messages constantly, it'll be a big help, I think. I've also slowed down the tip speed, and I know it seems not like much, but currently it's 20 minutes. I think I'm going to bump that up to 30 minutes or even 45 minutes, and then change the reboot timers to scale a little bit more. So if a reboot is like 12 hours out, it won't even say it once per hour, whereas if it's like within 6 hours, it'll say like every 30 minutes or so, something like that. Anyway, all very simple stuff. The other thing that I almost forgot to mention is the AFK timer. So now there is an AFK timer if I can get that config menu out of the way. And this is something that I might have toggleable in the future, but I think right now it's just 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. If you don't press a key in that duration, it'll set you to AFK. Currently, it only checks keys. So if you don't move, if you don't press any buttons, it won't count you as AFK, and you don't have to worry about that. I made that decision, and I think I'm going to stick with it because I don't really like mouse movements and mouse clicks and stuff like that triggering on AFKing, because I've always been in that stupid situation where you go do something and you come back and you're back for a very brief moment, but you moving your mouse counts you as on AFK, so people all around you decide to start RPing at you and stuff like that. I find that very frustrating. So unless you guys are very adamant about that, I think that's what I'm going with, and it's probably what I'll stick with. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to go over right now. It's just kind of a side thing. The big thing is spells. So biggest of all is now the central spell in the elemental tree actually has a purpose, and these spells out here, so the first 5 elements, or rather the first spell in all the 5 elements, actually matter, or rather the prereqs actually matter. In this case, it's Spirit's Blessing, and the same is true in this tree over here. So Spirit's Blessing is the same spell in both cases, and it's just shared to indicate that obviously you were talking about the same spell. In the elemental tree, it is most important because when you activate it, it improves your mana regeneration considerably. Currently, there's no visual for that. I don't know if it really needs one, to be entirely honest, because it's almost purely for the user. Again, with a lot of things in Verdict, I don't think I'm really trying hard to focus on allowing people to see mana. I think that typically mana-based mechanics are viewed as very toxic because, I mean, literally being made to be unable to cast spells is very frustrating. So in the future, it might be a specialized thing, but I don't want people to be, like, actually playing around their opponent's mana supply necessarily, in the same way that you'd see in MOBAs and that kind of thing. However, or I guess rather along with that strand, Spirit's Blessing is basically an answer to the people that have a really mana-intensive build. So if you have a build that's constantly ooming you every single fight, you can choose to sacrifice a slot on your bar to equip Spirit's Blessing, and you can see down here, it'll increase my mana regen, or it should. I guess it would if I wasn't capped currently, by a substantial amount. Or I guess... Oh, you know what? No, I know why that's happening. It's because I've screwed with my save settings. Anyway, the idea is the same. You just get higher mana regen. The reason I didn't is because I messed around with some of the things being saved. So it's currently behaving strange. Anyway, the idea, you probably understand. Anyway, there's also a new melee spell, or rather weapon spell. So this here is called Close Combat, and it is very similar in function to Spirit's Blessing. It is basically a answer to the people that would be using weapons that are lacking CC because they're using weapons, or that are lacking mobility because they're using weapons. So in response to this, you get a little bit of extra DR and a little bit of extra movement speed. And it's a toggle. It's easy as that, really. It really isn't that complicated, but I think it's very necessary because none of the spells in the weapon tree have any kind of CC. So that's sort of by design, and at the same time, that's sort of what you expect with weapons. It's also, like, it's very frustrating to play a weapon specialist and have no options, right, outside of just hoping you catch up, right? If your build just doesn't go in a direction with a lot of mobility, you're just kind of screwed, which doesn't feel great at all. So, again, relatively simple change, but I felt like it was very necessary to keep weapons and weapon specialists feeling on par with mages, and if not even above in some cases. So anyway, that's cool. That's all well and good. I think that I could demonstrate this, I guess. We can go in here and go here and click this. You can see it doesn't raise the move speed currently. That's a bug I need to fix. Currently, move speed buffs only register in terms of visuals here if they're sprinting. So you can see I can toggle that on and off, which is a little weird, and it's also 3%. That's because movement speed is a very weird stat that doesn't really behave like you'd expect it to. Like, for instance, if I turn this off and I start and stop running, this is obviously not 3%. I believe it's more like 300%. So I just need to interpret that in a little bit of a different way. But anyway, that's it for today's spell stuff, I think. And we can go ahead on over to new art assets and what's coming for art assets and some other things and outfits and so on. So stay tuned. Alright, so for once I think that I'm actually anticipating this part of the showcase with the art assets less than I'm anticipating the parts with the inventory systems and so on. And that's probably just because I love our alloy system quite a bit, and I'm proud of what I did there, but at the same time it's kind of exciting for that to be the case, because it means that the game itself is becoming more interesting, at least in my opinion, than the art within it. But anyway, that's kind of my own personal preference. I just wanted to take a minute to show off what I've been putting in the game recently, and specifically to the mappers as well. This weekend we should have the tile sets done. I kind of got distracted with my code work, so apologies about that. I know I promised that it would be done within the week, but it's, only a couple days, so hopefully they'll forgive me. Anyway, this stuff here is stuff I've already shown off before, or a lot of it is, and the only reason I'm showing it off now is because it has an attached density and an attached width and height, so that's pretty cool. You can see that turned off for some reason. Not entirely sure why, but it's because this is a new asset, so don't worry too much about it. The urns have densities as well. The bookshelves have a different height than the barrel, as you can see here. So you can, if I can get myself here, you can walk further behind the barrel than you can the bookshelf, which is cool. Not really that important, but it is what it is. And you can walk behind the trees, of course, and you can't walk under their trunk, which makes sense. And the overlays are still something that needs to be fixed, so you can see I can kind of walk under it, which is clearly unintended, but that's kind of a extraneous thing that I have to fix soon. So it's also something that's really simple to fix, so I'm not too stressed about that. But anyway, we also have some other things over here, like for instance this backwards lamp. This is something I added at Zyda's request. It's a very minor thing, but obviously very warranted. The bed is not dense, intentionally so, and the silverware down here, of course, aren't. But this table is, blah, blah, blah. All really simple stuff, but I wanted to show it off anyway. And we also got this wooden bridge down here, which is very simple and straightforward, and is not yet dense, but will be in the future. The only asset that we're waiting for the foreseeable future, and by waiting for, I mean waiting for me to get off my lazy ass and do it, or import it, rather. Importing, for the record, is extremely boring. It's very hard to motivate myself to do that because it's just labor. But anyway, we're just waiting for the multi-tiled cave tile set and the rocky tile set. And once those are imported and properly organized and all that crap, you'll be able to have fully fledged, pardon my mouth, fully fledged mountains that you can walk on and explore and walk up and so on and so forth. So really cool stuff there. That'll be a next showcase for sure. Absolutely, 100% promise. And other than that, I think that we're good. Actually, there's one thing I want to show off. If I can drag this here real quick. It's just Howl's new swords. So this is pretty cool. This sword down in the bottom left was one we already had. And this sword is, that bottom left sword is so good that I might reserve it for something like legendary tier maybe. I'm not sure. It was meant to just be epic, but it is genuinely one of the best pieces he's made for us, or just in general in my opinion. But anyway, these go down in terms of rarity, or up rather. So it goes from mundane to uncommon to rare to epic, and currently there are no plans to have legendary sprites just yet, but stay tuned if you're curious about that in the future. Maybe we'll see. Anyway, other than that, these are just sprite options. So if you're making a rare sword, you can choose from one of these two, and I'll probably include a bunch of recolors, so you have a lot of options in that regard, and we'll explore from there. I think that's everything that I have to show off. The only thing I want to talk about left is what about clothing and what about other weapons. So like I mentioned in the showcase channel itself, Howl is currently working on spears, I believe, which is one of 2 remaining weapon types that we need to get done. Once he's done spears, he'll do bows, and bows are the final weapon type set. So what that means is it's the final set that we'll have done before beta, and that's a full quote-unquote set in regards to these, I guess, 6 weapons. So 1 for mundane, uncommon, and then 2 for rare and epic. After that's done, which shouldn't take more than a week or so, we'll start work on outfits. I'm getting him to do some of those. I didn't blame him for not wanting to prior, because it is a lot of work. It is an insane amount of work. I've talked about this so many times, but I don't blame any artist who doesn't want to do that kind of outfit work, because it's hundreds of man hours for very basic clothing. It's just not befitting of a great artist, to be honest. So don't blame him for that, which is why we've done the spine stuff and gotten that changed. And I think that we'll really be able to show off what spine can do with those really cool outfits in his design, because he's obviously pretty exceptional at doing things in this style. So I'm hype about that. I hope you guys are too. If you want to see more about that, feel free to stick around, of course, and listen in on next week's showcase. Once that's done, I'll be sure to, or rather, once everything's done, I'll be sure to release little teasers in the showcase channel itself, like I did this week. And other than that, I think that we're good. So yeah, we're really closing in. Like I've told a couple people asked, and I said about release, that is, and about beta, and I said as soon as the outfits are done, I'm going to be doing, or at least one outfit is done. I want one outfit so when people are playing, they aren't just naked. And once that one outfit is done, we will do a playtest, like not a public playtest, but a very nearly public playtest, and see how that runs. And as long as that runs smoothly, which it should, and by smoothly I mean the server doesn't crash. It's okay if like people with terrible computers have some trouble. That I can get over and I can optimize. But anyway, as long as the game itself does not crash and burn, which it should not, ideally, we should be under a month from beta. There is nothing else standing in our way that I can think of, other than stuff where I just add and modify as we go and optimize and stuff. So again, as long as the game does not literally crash and burn, we'll be set for that launch. And that playtest is really important to me because I need to know performance stats. Like if it runs super well with 20 people, we can probably reduce the cost of the Patreon. If it runs very poorly with 20 people, we might have to delay it a bit or might have to up the cost of the Patreon to play or whatever. It really depends. I'm not entirely sure just yet. We'll see. But I'm predicting it will run fairly well because currently on a $10 server, it runs with one person constantly with almost no issues. So I really don't foresee that becoming a problem. And yeah, so, just forewarning you guys, I don't know exactly how things are going to go, but I think they'll go great, and I hope they go great. So, with any luck, things will be in motion within a month or so. So, look forward to that. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you get over this coronavirus thing, just as I hope everybody else does. It's obviously pretty scary, so whatever the case, hope you have a great week, and I hope you look forward to the next showcase. Bye.